Hi everyone, good afternoon, and welcome to the final episode of our second Movement and Skill Acquisition webinar series of 2020, entitled Women Who Have Changed the Discussion. So MSAI is comprised of Ed Collin, Phil Carney, Ollie Logan, and myself, Alan Dunton, and we're passionate about skill acquisition, coaching science and youth development. And we hope that by hosting these webinars, we're able to connect you with some leading figures in their respective areas. For content on our previous conferences and webinars, including the one that we're running at the moment, you can find us on our YouTube channel. We are at MSA Ireland, and be sure to subscribe. So a significant catalyst for this webinar series was provided by former Ireland field hockey captain and current England under-18s coach Sarah Kelleher. Sarah spoke passionately about the need for more stories, more voices, and a greater effort to raise the profile of female coaches in an interview with Kieran Shannon in the Irish Examiner before she came on our webinar series earlier in the year. In response to Sarah's call, we've decided to run this webinar series with the theme of women who have changed the discussion in order to promote the great work of female academics, researchers, and practitioners alike. So we're really fortunate to be supported in this series by the 20 by 20 campaign here in Ireland, and we're even more fortunate to be supported by the generosity of our speakers in this series. And with that, let me just briefly introduce you to today's panel members who have a wealth of knowledge and experience in this area. So our host for today is Marie Crowe, who's an award-winning sports journalist and broadcaster with RTE Sport, with over a decade of experience. Marie currently hosts Game On, a daily sports show on RTE's 2FM. Next, we have Irene Hogan, a lecturer at the Cork Institute of Technology. Irene is currently a PhD candidate in Mary Immaculate College Limerick, researching women in coaching, with a particular focus on volunteer women coaches in the Ladies Gaelic Football Association. Then we have Lynne Cantwell, a former Irish rugby player who's represented Ireland 86 times. Lynne is currently the chair of Sport Ireland's Women in Sports Committee and on the Sports Ireland and is on the Sport Ireland board. Our next panel member is Claire Lamb. Claire has over 15 years of rowing experience and competed for Ireland at junior, under 23 and senior level, most notably representing Ireland at the Rio Olympics. Claire is currently the Women in Sport lead for Rowing Ireland. And our final panel member is Nora Stapleton, who has a vast amount of experience at the highest level of multiple sports as a player and a coach. Nora was previously the Ireland Rugby Women's and Girls Development Manager and is currently the Women in Sport lead with Sport Ireland, where her remit is implementing the Women in Sport policy. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Marie, and she's going to get us going.
Thanks a million, Alan. I have to say I'm absolutely delighted to be involved in hosting this webinar today. The names that are on the panel, I think if I was looking to find information about women's coaching and the development of it, the people that are involved today are exactly where I'd go. So absolutely brilliant to be involved. And I think just to kick it off, because women's sport and the development of women's sport, it's only just getting going. And even the roles that our panelists are in, I don't think that people would be very familiar with what you guys do. So I'm going to just go around the houses, if you don't mind, and just to maybe explain a little bit about your role and how it started and where you see it going, because these roles are new, they're different, and we're just in the infancy of getting women's sport and coaching up and going. So it'd be really great to hear that. Nora, I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind, because I know you're really experienced in these webinars.
God. Thanks very much, Marie. Yeah, so my role, it's very new to Sport Ireland. I've been in the job now just over a year and a half, and how it came about, and I'm sure Lynne will kind of touch on this as well, because she was on the board of Sport Ireland before I came in. But basically, there's been a Women in Sport programme in Sport Ireland since 2005, and to date we've invested over 22 million across women in sport programmes into the national governing bodies and into the local sports partnerships. In 2018, Sport Ireland decided to do a review of that programme. I guess, like anything, it's important to review what you've been doing to see if it's still fit for purpose and how might you tweak things. So that review was done, and Lynne would have been a little bit part of that there. But from the review, they then produced the policy on women in sport. And then there were kind of three key aims or objectives in that. I guess to even kick it off, first of all, one was that they'd employ Women in Sport lead to help implement the policy. Another was to ensure that there was a Women in Sport steering committee there as well. And that steering committee has given me an awful lot of support. So my role is to implement the policy and its 4 key pillars. So you have active participation, obviously getting more females being active, leadership and governance. So how do we ensure that more females are involved in the decision making around sport? Visibility, so everything from our high performance athletes, but also just to the visibility of females within sport. So that's our coaches, our leaders, those who are commentating on games, the likes of yourself within media, etc., etc. And then the final pillar is coaching and officiating. So obviously that's why I'm really keen to be part of this webinar. And most recently we've run a survey, a women in coaching survey. So I'm just happy to maybe share some of the results that we have from that today and talk about how we can support female coaches.
Sounds great. Claire, you're next on my window, so I'm going to go with you. Tell us a little bit about your role.
Thanks, Marie. So I guess I kind of stem then down the line from Sport Ireland and the funding that they've put in now with Nora's role and that funding for NGB level. So I was appointed there coming up on a year ago through that funding and as Women in Sport lead within Rowing Ireland. So I guess when I took on the role, we did a bit of a review of women's participation in rowing and looked at those different pillars. We identified that coaching and officiating to be kind of the biggest gap for gender balance in our sport. So over the last 9 months, we've kind of developed our Women in Sport strategy for the and retention then of women in coaching and officiating.
Lynne, Cantwell.
Thanks, Marie. Hi, everybody. So I am Lynne Cantwell. I played rugby for Ireland for a number of years, and when I retired, we were very lucky, I think, as amateur sports people, and although the ambition for all of us is to ensure that sport for women goes down the professional route, I think we were very lucky as amateurs to be very grounded in who we were as people and not have that really close identity with your sport. So much so that when your sport finishes, you still, know who you are the other side of it. And I knew very clearly that I still wanted to contribute to driving sport in Ireland. And at that time, I suppose it was very clear we'd had some experiences within rugby that I felt were not ambitious in line with what we could achieve. And I wanted to try and contribute to that change. And so I saw that a lot of that was influenced heavily at a decision-making level. I was keen to try and understand at a board level and understand more about how to develop as a board member and in the leadership and governance role. So I applied to be a board member at Sport Ireland and was lucky enough to get that. I went on there in 2018. And then within that, I'm on 2 subcommittees, obviously the Women in Sport Committee, the origins of that happened at around the same time, and then the High Performance Committee. So my role as a board member is to independently give my opinion on our board function. And then as the chair of the Women in Sport Committee, our role is very specifically to ensure the implementation of the policy. And Nora is our lead, and we're just in such good hands, it's ridiculous. So where coaching comes into that, I think what we're finding, Nora, is that a lot of the themes that are blocking sounds very negative, but I suppose blocking women aspiring into leadership and governance positions are similar to coaching positions and to officiating positions. So we see common themes across the pillars. We're very passionate about the women in coaching piece because I think it's hugely untapped. And I know as a player, I think what I found as the most pivotal thing to enable us to accelerate our learning, having come late to the game. I mean, that women's sport is arriving to sport later as a majority than men's sport is coaching. Coaching, technical skills and technical input and technical communication is just key. And we were really passionate to ensure that we invested in that so that more women's sports could thrive, as well as more women in coaching positions could thrive, because that's as important as male coaches.
Thanks, Lynne. And Irene?
Yeah, so hi everyone. Really hard act to follow with all those household names. So I am delighted to be part of today, and thanks to the MSAI team for inviting me. So a bit of my own background, I suppose I'm mainly here because of my research on women in coaching, and in particular female volunteer coaches. My own background, I would have played ladies football, I'd have coached ladies football, I'd have been club officer of ladies football, and I suppose I really had positive female role models. So my coaching actually started in transition year in school. I did my first coach education course under tutor Eamon Ryan at the time, so a well-known name. So it was GA foundation level, and it's only looking back now, I realised that was probably out of the ordinary, but I was in an all-girls school. We just did it as part of our curriculum. And I suppose strong females within my club that would have got me involved in coaching from the age of 18, been involved in summer camps, coaching different underage teams, adult teams, college teams, and currently coaching Gaelic for mothers and others. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Irene. I think before we start to look forward and to look what's kind of coming next and how we've got here, I'd just like to look back a little bit. And I'm going to start with you, Lynne, if you don't mind. Just like playing rugby at the highest level, you're one of the first teams that we got to see really at the elite stage, at the, looking like professionals, although not professional in name. Just when you were coming through the ranks and developing as a sports person, did you have access to many female coaches? Were there many that you encountered along the way?
No, that's a good question. Not so many in rugby. My first sport was athletics, and Hayley Harrison was my coach. So I was a 400-meter hurdler. I don't know how a 5'3" girl could afford. Let's just talk about that another day. But yeah, so she was, and I suppose my an important observation that I have found and reflected on has been that athletics was my first sport, and I only joined rugby at 20. And I probably didn't realize that I was a woman in sport until I joined rugby, because everything in athletics was just performance. It was just everybody trying to be better. So that was just kind of an interesting reflection. So Hayley Harrison was my coach. And I had loads of male coaches up to that point, Joey Evans in Fingallians. And then in rugby, mainly male coaches, and that's probably just reflective of the age of the game.
I think from a GA background point of view, I had a few female coaches, but a lot of the time, the females that were involved in the team were more the organizational side of things. They were doing a lot of the driving, the collecting, the making sandwiches, the washing jerseys. Irene, from your research, have you found that has changed a bit, or what kind of roles are women taking up now when they're getting involved with teams? Because all teams now have women involved in some sort of capacity.
Yeah, and I suppose that female liaison officer role is what you're referring to there, Maria, and it is still very prominent because with female teams, they have to have a female liaison person, and they do tend to do more admin jobs and those kind of management jobs, but it is changing. And from my research, the 14 women that were in my study would have talked about their playing experience and how being a player has given them the confidence to now get into coaching. And I suppose those underage players that they're currently coaching will now see that, oh, well, I've had a female coach, so there's a pathway for me to get into coaching then as well. So it is changing, but I suppose it is slow. We still have kind of perceptions of what the female role is with teams, and that kind of unconscious gender bias, I suppose, that comes into it. When females are on the sideline, they're still asked questions about where the water bottles to be filled. Have you paid the referee? Where's the team sheet? And they could just easily be the lead coach with the team, but it's just that, I suppose, breaking down those biases is probably our next step, really.
Yeah, and that does take time. And even if you look over the last few years, even seeing those roles evolve, I think that's amazing. And seeing females take the lead roles in organisations, as we've seen in Rowing Ireland, we're seeing down in Cork GA with Tracy Kennedy, we've seen it in Tyrone, and all those things help and they take time. But Nora, from looking at some of the research that is out there, one thing that really struck me, and it's almost a little bit sad, that it's a confidence thing, that women aren't confident enough to go after these roles, and trying to instill that confidence. Okay, having the pathway and seeing other people do it is very helpful, but what else can be done to try and make women understand that they can do it too?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and maybe before I answer that question, I'll just touch on the survey that we completed, and we had 2,400 responses to that, and of them, 66% had a female coach or stated that they had a female coach when they were playing. So we find that really interesting. We actually thought that it would be much lower. But then of that 66%, about 50% of them said it had a positive impact on their decision to then become a coach. So that kind of does highlight to us that the more female coaches we have, it's going to influence 50% of another cohort who are going to decide to take up coaching as well. When we asked, or when we went through the survey, we asked them, you know, what are the challenges that you experience within coaching? And we also asked them, do you have any ambitions to progress as a coach? And lack of confidence came up again and again and again. Now, it wasn't actually the strongest point that came through. There were a couple of other points, and things like lack of support from the club. That was really, really strong, and really it was mentioned quite a few times. And then we were quite surprised by the kind of maybe gender issues or sexism coming through as well. So not only, and quite often that lack of confidence can come from being treated unfairly as a female coach, or being treated differently as a female coach, either by the club that they're involved in or by other coaches who they're working with or might be coaching with. And a lot of the reports that were coming through were people saying, you know, I wish I was more respected by the male coaches who I'm coaching with, or the male coaches in the club. So that's probably like a really, really important factor. And I think when we then look at, well, what needs to be done in order to recruit more female coaches, but more importantly, how do we keep the current coaches that we have, and how do we develop and progress them through? And the big response coming out is we actually need to support the clubs more to support the coaches, and we need to look at the culture that exists either in sports or in clubs, and how do we ensure that it's more female friendly, really.
Yeah, I think that could nearly be the $1 million question, and it does feel like a little bit away. And I know that it's probably a lot of cause for debate, but you do look at whether, and maybe I'll put this to you, Claire, whether having like specific female coaching courses is a good thing or a bad thing, because in a way it does create that safe environment where you can be comfortable and ask the questions, but at the same time then you are being treated differently. So it's hard to know what's the best way to approach it. What, from your experience, Claire, have you found do women want?
I think from the formal coach education side, I would personally, and probably from the last year of experience, be against kind of having the formal coach education segregated. And I think a lot of the coach educators within Rowan Ireland, we have the similar view. But I think we have ran a number of like coaching workshops or women only coach development courses. And the feedback always across the board, by the end of it anyway, is that they want more of the women only things. And whilst even one coach like kind of stood out to me before when I first came into the role and was like kind of traveling around the clubs and having those conversations, she really was questioning, why are we focusing at all on just women coaches, you know? And then following one of these women only workshops, she came back and said, I fully get it now. I've never been in a workshop with that sort of environment where I can ask those questions. Everyone's like, no one's afraid of being vulnerable and asking something stupid, and then the rhetoric is always very open to encouragement and support from the other coaches as well. So I think we need to look at like, how can we eliminate that need that we need any women only workshops or courses. But I think for the time now, I'd like to develop more women only development workshops, but still maintain the mix on the formal coach level courses. So yeah, I think it's a balance at this point until we maybe bridge that gap and build the confidence of the female coaches.
Irene, what have you found from your research in relation to that?
Yeah, so similar, of the 14 ladies in my study, only 2 of them were in favour of female only, but I think it's like Claire suggested there, it's because they haven't been exposed to female only maybe, and do see that it's creating an extra barrier, maybe isolating them further by, as you mentioned, Marie, that difference, you're creating a difference there. But they are willing and eager to learn and to develop as coaches. So, you know, the idea of workshops maybe, and that support within the club environment is something that came back really strongly from them. So they all had completed coach education up as far as level foundation level, but some had done level 1 and even a few had done level 2, and they didn't want more coach education, the prescriptive type of formal coach education, but they wanted support within their club environment where they could have maybe a mentoring style environment where they're, coaches coming together and learning from each other. So that's something that they want in their clubs and that they think will help build their confidence, like Nora mentioned, and also that confidence, once it's built, it'll keep them in coaching. So it'll attract new people and keep them in coaching.
And Lynne, just from the point of view of retention, because we do see so many women play sport and then leave the game, like just once they're finished playing, they don't get back involved, and it's many different factors. And some of it is family life or lack of support. But is there ways to try and keep them involved?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's we know the profile of coaches can vary, but if we focus specifically in on like athlete transition, as an athlete's been in a good place to take on a coaching position or officiating or manager, I think what we know from an athlete point of view is that they have the technical knowledge which is necessary to coach, which is, we see it as kind of half of what's necessary. The other half is leadership, communication style, and obviously that needs mastery in its own sense, but the technical knowledge is there from being a player, which is helpful. But how do you contact them? I think what's been recognised by the SCORE and World Rugby, a lot of the work that they've done has been that there needs to be kind of multiple points and multiple taps on the shoulder. So to Nora's point, if the actual clubs were supported as to how to do that, they'd know that, okay, we recognise when there's an injured player, that's a useful time to talk to them, or we know that player is going to retire after that World Cup or after this championship. Let's talk to them a year before. Just put it in your mind while you're in the system. How about you go out on Sunday morning and just take that coaching session and just see what it's like. And then maybe when they're retiring, a year after they're retiring, maybe 2 years after retiring. So that network is really, really important. So those multiple touch points are really, really important. I know when I retired, I was full with commitment. I'd been playing for 13 years. I'd never had a weekend. I trained every night of the week and I didn't want to give my weekends up again, So if you had have contacted me 2 years down the line or after you've had your kids or something with like a family friendly way of how you can get it. So I think just the flexibility of how you talk to players, there's lots of mechanisms there, which I think is a really good thing to consider.
And Nora, I think as well that seeing the value, because women can bring great value, and that's something that I think is untapped just from a sheer numbers, because there's so many women involved in sports that are lost to the game, and it's trying to make clubs understand that there's a huge value in tapping into those resources. Is that something you think that's been developed?
Yeah, no, totally. And it comes down to like recruitment. Where do we find our coaches? Do we find them at a grassroots level? So where do they exist? Are they the parents of the kids who are getting involved? Are they the older brother and sister? Are they the third level student? Are they the adult players? So it's about being able to like map out all the various areas where you can find coaches. But back to some of Lynne's point, and even to what Claire and Irene were saying as well, I think when it comes to those type of supports that we can offer, and so mentoring was mentioned, and that's a key one. And mentoring doesn't have to be a big expensive program that the NGB puts in place. Mentoring can be some form of buddy system set up in the club. We have access to coaching networks, so we see how Claire's trying to develop that for her sport as well. But again, within the club, how can the club develop a coaching network between all the coaches where they might meet up once a month just to have a chat about what they're implementing in their own sport. Conferences, forums obviously are a big thing, and whether that is single or mixed genders or female only, I think Claire's totally right. I think females benefit from having female only, but we can't come away from the mixed events, because not only does it it's important for those mixed events, but men also benefit from the mixed events as well. A couple of other things: shadowing coaches. So I think like if females lack that confidence, that it's okay to have those kind of shadowing options, or even co-coaching as well. So Lynne mentioned transitions and in our life stages, and like all coaches, whether male or female, are going to have some major transitions that they're going to have to manage through their life, whether that is having kids, moving house, moving to a new country, changing jobs, having to prioritize work, etc., etc. So it's about being able to, like, one, it's for the NGBs to be able to even manage those transitions when it comes to a high performance coach. So how can you help your high performance female coaches manage those? And the NGB might have those conversations, but then how do we help the clubs manage it as well? So making sure that it's telling a female coach that it's okay to only coach one night a week. You know, we tend to think of coaching as it's going to take over my life. I have to do it 2 nights a week and I'm away all day Saturday. And that's just physically not possible. Like the two biggest barriers or challenges that coaches, female coaches are telling us that they're having. One is parents. So parents seem to come in that they're just a pain in the side all the time. And the other is time constraints. So if we can help reduce those, you know, just those challenges that the female coaches are experiencing, then that's going to free up more of their time and they're going to want to be more involved in coaching. So like for me, I'm a coach in Old Belvedere at the minute. And my wife has, like, we had a kid back in start of January. He's now 10 months. I went back to coaching, but the guilt trip that I went through, that I felt myself of going back to coaching, knowing that she was at home 2 nights a week with him and that I was gone every day Saturday, like that was really difficult to handle. But then it took for in the club, we've set up like a really good network of coaches. So now we've got about 6 coaches. So it means that we're never going to be short, that I'm able to coach 1 night a week when I have to coach 1 night a week. And that if I'm going to go to the match, I don't have to be there 2 hours before to, you know, get things organized, that I can turn up before the warm up. Or if it comes to it, I can turn up just when the match is going to start. But that's all okay. And I don't have to feel guilty about that. And I think those type of things and that type of culture is really important. And I feel that that's going to also come in to men who are coaching as well, because I think family life and family commitments is becoming so much more important now.
Yeah, and I think as well, the division of labour is changing as well over time, you know, and both parents are out at work now, and sometimes it's the dad staying at home, and now with the pandemic, it's everybody at home, so it's completely different. But Claire, if you move on to the elite side of things, and you know, I think another way that we would like to see coaching develop is that people have careers as coaches, you know, and it's a rare enough thing that you're seeing women in that very top level elite coaching role. And, you know, you have to wonder, is it a case that they're ever going to get there?
Yeah, I think from a rowing perspective, that's a really difficult one, and particularly in Ireland, because we've so few paid professional coaching roles. You either are a member of the Irish high performance team, and even still a lot of those are volunteer coaches, and then potentially maybe at university level, and again that's kind of either part pay. So professional rowing coaching is a difficult one, but I think it's something like, just as an NGB we need to probably look at, or you know, develop clubs to maybe be able to support someone in a part-time capacity, because just the time demands on rowing coaches are really high. And from even Nora's Women in Coaching survey, most of the women actually said they're putting in 9+ hours a week, like, into their coaching, and completely voluntarily doing so. So yeah, I guess the professional side is probably a long way down the line, but I definitely, what we do want to see, there still are those lead coaching positions, whether they're fully paid or voluntary. There is lead positions within clubs, university, and then obviously the high performance team. And at the moment, there's a complete lack of female rowing coaches in those roles. So with support of Sport Ireland, and in collaboration with Cycling Ireland, Triathlon Ireland, and Boxing Ireland, we basically developed a high performance coaching pathway to hopefully support a number of ambitious coaches that would like to move into that coaching space. We're running it this year, but hopefully it can be more of a long-term pathway that we really do support them the whole way along into those positions. So I can go into more detail on the supports that we're providing there, but I think it's really about giving the opportunity for those coaches to get experience in that high performance space, and that can be quite difficult if they're operating at a club level, and sometimes overlooked even for being the coach that heads down to trials and puts themselves in that environment.
And I think that leads on perfectly to the importance of having women in decision-making roles, that there are women there that understand, you know, some of the difficulties that Nora would have outlined there about the challenges that face when you're trying to juggle everything, and to have someone to help create pathways that can accommodate people who are ambitious in terms of going to a professional coaching route or the elite coaching roads that you would have in something like rowing. And, you know, are we getting enough people into these decision-making roles, do you think?
Like, I think we're on the way there. I think obviously we've got a long way to go, but I think a huge part of all of this is awakening the world. But if we just say to Ireland, of the value of difference. So we know that the origins of sport was designed relatively and populated by males, and the system by which it operates is therefore male specific. And what women are trying to do, not trying to do, but have a right to do, if that's probably a wrong way to phrase it, is to play sport. You know, it's not owned by anybody, but I think the clunkiness in the system comes out in the fact that the system is not women specific. So we need to have systems that are flexible to support women in it as well as men. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is, like, coaching is a coach. It's not a gender that should be a coach, you know, because of all of the things in sport, it's the one thing that doesn't have to be gender specific at all. So yes, I think we need to do a lot of work to educate the system to see that, and that comes down to the subconscious bias that Irene's talking about in groupthink, and ensure that at a policy level that we're looking at sport inclusively and through a diverse lens, to appreciate the different versions of sport that women bring, which add equal value. They're just different. So I think that's important. And I think, just to Claire's point there, if you don't mind me saying, I suppose we have to look to the future. And if we look 10 years ago, there wasn't many performance directors in the system that were paid. There wasn't many full-time male coaches in the system that were paid. There wasn't many high-performance systems in Ireland that were as elite as they are now, but they are there now. So in 5 years' time, there will be more roles for female coaches and for fully paid coaches. So I think we have to work towards that ambition, that's where we need to go, because I definitely think it will happen.
Yeah, well, you would hope so anyway. And I think if you look at the change in the last few years, and Irene, I know it's only it's something that we're quite used to, but I just think that Gaelic for Mothers and Others has just been revolutionary. And if you could almost package what you've done there and turn it into some sort of a coaching development, so that women can progress as coaches and not just leave once their kids are finished, that would be absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to just getting the confidence and the skills and playing the game, and then getting the bug for being involved in ladies football. And while it's non-competitive and there's no scores kept, it's a great social event, but it's also getting people involved. So I think the Gaelic for Mothers and Others is an area that can be tapped into to try and get coaching, and just even build it into that 1 hour a week that they're giving to the Gaelic for Mothers and Others. They are getting a chance to get out at that time. So building in, how to teach the skill, because for some of them, they only ever play football at that level. That recreational side of the sport is their first taste of the sport. So yeah, definitely. I mean, we know we have, plenty of females that have coach education completed, but we also know we don't have that many active within the club. So I would agree, Marie, with the Gaelic for Mothers and Others is definitely a resource to tap into.
And Irene as well, I think there's a feeling that women feel that they need to have played, they need to have played at some sort of level to be able to coach.
Yeah, and it's funny, that is something that came back. It was just to get that confidence again, to know, what a solo is before I can actually break the solo down and teach it to a small child or to a new footballer. So it is that, the playing experience, they totally link it to confidence. And I suppose that's our first pool that we need to tap into, as those that have played the game. And then if we can increase the numbers that way, we can, reach out more to those that have never played the game and try and get them into coaching then. But it's a slow process, but it's definitely achievable, I think.
And Nora, what about the back rooms that we see in so many professional teams? Like, we don't have a huge amount of professional coaches to look to, but when you look in, we'll say in a rugby or a soccer capacity or Gaelic football as well, like, are you seeing many women coming through as S&C coaches, as physios, as nutritionists, as sports psychologists, or is it still very much a male-dominated place?
No, I don't. Well, you see, it depends. Are we talking about male sport or female sport? I think in male sport it can be, but I'm not involved in enough teams to know any different. Although I do know females who are involved in male teams or with male athletes. Like, it's hard because if you talk about physios, you know, there's the age-old example that female coaches will give where they're, you know, people think that they're the physio as opposed to being the coach. So I don't want to go down that route and kind of, you know, start to say, well, it's okay if we have physios and nutritionists, but we don't have coaches. But I think like you're definitely seeing more and more people working in sport, 100%. Whether that is analyzing games or our athletes, whether it's S&C, that is, like, sport has gotten so big. Even since we've been working in it, you know, like when I started working for the GEA, my IRFU role didn't exist. When I was working for the IRFU, my Sport of Ireland role didn't exist. So I think there are more and more opportunities available in sport. I think like some sports are doing it quite well. You know, you'll see maybe a lot of female assistant coaches, and that is kind of around that idea of giving them an opportunity to coach at a higher level, so that they're gaining that experience. Because it's already been mentioned, the opportunities that exist to coach at a high level can be few and far between them. And then if they're paid roles, you have a lot more people interested in them. And quite often a lot more men will apply for those paid roles than females. So those are the type of things that we're trying to change. So even if we could instill habits, for example, if you are hiring a coach and it's a paid role, that you headhunt for females, that you ensure that you at least have females who are applying for it, that you ensure that they're seeing the application, or even that there's an application process for it. You know, quite often some of these roles, whether it's in universities or with counties, might just be people throwing their name into the hat, or word of mouth and things like that. So how do we ensure that there's some sort of recruitment process attached, and where those in charge of hiring that person are putting somebody in place, that they're actively going out and seeking females. And I know that it can sometimes take a little bit longer, but females are, like, it is well known that females are less likely to put their hand up for a role. They're less likely to apply. They believe that they're not equipped for the role, or they don't have enough experience. You know, the list is endless. But often that they'll be more inclined to put their name forward if somebody asks them, and it just gives them that little nudge, that little bit of confidence. And no, I think you might be good for this. You know, throw your name into the hat. And when that happens, we're seeing more people who are more appropriate for the role. So like there are definitely more females out there who can be better in coaching roles. And we're seeing them now stepping forward, but it takes that little bit of nudge and a little bit of recruiting them differently or selecting them differently.
Can I just jump in there, just to pick up on Nora's point there about recruitment, because I think it's an important one, and I think we had a mention of it on the chat there. I think the transparency about recruitment processes, I think, something that's encouraged, like to make sure that the jobs are going on the website, that they are visible, that you're using gender-friendly images in the adverts for them, even gender-friendly descriptions in the job description. I think there's some research from Forbes about the types of words that men are attracted to, and words in job descriptions that are competitive and dominant, as opposed to supportive and collaborative, or things that women would be attracted to. So I think all of those things are important just to consider. So there's all just kind of system things that can be addressed, which influence the culture, so that the people that are actually making the decisions are aware of it too. So I think that speaks to the cultural piece of this whole conversation.
We have a question in from Alison O'Riordan, and she's going to ask it herself.
Hi, Marie. Thanks for allowing me to speak. I'm a coach. I'm an athletics coach. I currently national throws coach for Paralympics Ireland, but coaching has been my profession for over 20 years. And just to raise a few of the points that I think both Lynne and Nora raised, that coaching shouldn't be based on gender. So the best coach should be employed regardless on how well they can, based on how they can do their job, not on their gender. However, I also believe that there has to be opportunity, and many of the more professional coaching roles, the recruitment processes aren't transparent and they're not open to everybody. So even if you do have a confident female coach out there, they don't always get that opportunity to put their name in the ring. So they're just two of the areas that I've experienced myself along the way. Yes, I just wanted to put that in.
Well, Nora,
Alice, could I just ask
now, Nora, so you might be able to answer this one.
Well, yeah, I was just going to ask Alice, like, how did she, because a fantastic coaching career there, 20 years involved is absolutely amazing. So I'm just wondering, there's probably loads of people listening going, well, what kept you in the sport? Because retention is a massive, massive point. And from what I'm seeing, retention does come back to, did you have a good support network around you? Did you have opportunities to develop? Did you feel supported by your club? And did you feel supported by your sport or your national governing body? So for Alice, for you staying in the sport, were those all ticked off for you and that's why you're still there?
No, not at all.
Sorry.
No, not at all, Nora. I was an athlete. I wanted to be an Olympic champion. I recognised quite early that I probably wasn't going to do that, but I did want to reach the highest levels in sport. So I purposely chose to go down the coaching career very, very, very many years ago. I also recognised I needed to be the best that I could possibly be. So I studied sports science. I continued to study. I've just finished my PhD. I'm always looking for different angles that I could come be different. I have to be different. Otherwise, why would anybody look at me over anybody else? I grew up in the UK. I live in London, but I recognised quite early that, and we're talking 30 years ago, that my future probably in coaching wasn't going to be in the UK. So I moved to Australia because I thought Australia was going to do it for me. And that's where I started my coaching. I was fortunate to be picked up by the Australian Institute of Sport. And they did say at the time that they generally don't take on people that they don't already know, but my application was a strong application. They could see that I had addressed a number of areas. So that was my starting point, and I was with the Australian team for 9 years before I moved back to the UK. So it's about recognising the opportunities, but also recognising that it isn't just going to happen, that you're probably going to have to work really, really hard to be the best that you can be, and potentially better than anybody else as well. And
just as well, like following up what Alison said there, that personal growth development, so that's another thing that comes out in how do we support female coaches, because it isn't just about them going on and doing the next coaching qualification. That upskilling and that education piece is how do we help them with other areas, and everything from how do you develop the coach-athlete relationship to team bonding, team building, to be more aware of nutrition, S&C, etc. Those type of things as well were coming through that people wanted to be supported with. So it's just really interesting to hear that.
And Nora, as well, do you often hear, or do you ever hear of somebody actually coming out and saying, I want to be a coach, this is something that I want to do, I have ambitions to make a career out of coaching? Just hearing Alison saying that, and knowing that she said that 20 years ago and went out and did it. And also another thing that she mentioned there as well, she really loved it. It's fun, it's enjoyable. Like that, sometimes we get bogged down sometimes in just the processes of it and getting there, that you nearly forget that people want to be coaches because they enjoy it.
Yeah, well, enjoyment is the biggest factor, and that's why they're motivated to do it. That the real sense of passion for their sport and seeing players develop really comes across as to why females are motivated to coach. But it's such a shame that people have to leave their country to if they know that they want to progress and they can't do it within Ireland. Like I know Claire had a rowing coach who had to do something similar. So it is happening in Ireland, and the big thing now is how do we stop that? How do we try and keep these really qualified? They might not be qualified yet, but really enthusiastic and really excellent coaches within Ireland, and that's going to be certainly the biggest challenge. But I think that's why coaching is one of our key pillars. That's why we're looking at it. It's why we want to fund the likes of the program that Claire's rolling out with rowing and triathlon, cycling, boxing, that those females into high performance roles. How can we support them here in Ireland without them feeling that they have to move countries? And I mean, just recently, the other week, I had a female ring me because she wants to be a performance director in a sport, and she's wondering what the pathway is to doing that because she just doesn't see any pathway for herself. So that's huge ambition, you know, and it's fantastic to see a young female that she knows that's what she wants to do and that's what she wants to be in life. She wants to be the high performance director of a sport.
And Claire, there was a question in here from Aoife Callagher, and she's talking about 20 by 20 and believes firmly that it has helped improve the culture for female involvement across sport and roles, player, volunteer and coaches. And she feels that national campaigns are important to continue into the future. And if you even just like take your role and similar roles like yours in other sports and the value of them, and also the fact that, you know, they're so focused and driven to do something specific that ties in quite nicely with 20 by 20 and what they were trying to do.
Yeah, no, the momentum at the moment is really amazing, and I think we will see the change of that over the next decade and hopefully beyond. Like if I think back to my time when I was junior athlete, or kind of 2008 era, one of my my rowing friends basically was based over in Galway, and she was kind of top junior at the time, and she was coached by a coach called Robin. And it was only actually like in the last couple of years that I realized that her coach was a female. Like I just hadn't come across female coaches, and like because I hadn't seen it, I just had that automatic assumption that she's coached by a male coach and she's really successful, and that must be a really, really good coach. And I don't think that an athlete would, and I think we're really moving away from that athletes now are starting to see women in sport and also in coaching roles as well. But I think it's really important where we just really emphasize that visibility and not overlook it on the coaching and officiating side. I think it's really important. And also just there's two aspects to that in putting our coaching role models out there, not just for people to see, but also to give them like the recognition that they deserve. They can be quite the kind of quiet, unassuming supporter and have done massive things for the sport, and they don't get the recognition that they deserve, especially in a sport where it's predominantly voluntary. So I think even just giving them that bit of kudos, making them visible, and hopefully boost their confidence as well to kind of keep going with that coaching and again addressing that retention of keeping women involved in coaching.
Lynne, I know that Hayley Harrison is Tommy Barr's coach as well, and I don't think I've ever seen her interviewed.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like Phil will know this as well. It's not that Hayley is by any stretch shy, so I'm not too sure actually what's behind that, but I'm sure there's something conscious. Like picking up on Claire's point there, just about visibility of coaches. Like myself and Nora, a few months ago, we had a conversation with them. With photographer, and what they noticed in their company is that the consumer appetite for seeing female coaches is growing. So you'll know more about this than I do, Marie, but from a search engine point of view, people are looking for female coaches, and when pictures of female coaches are online, it's generating more interactions and more interest. So like that's all behavioral stuff that is obviously just giving us more information that this is something that people want to see, they're interested in it. And I most certainly latch on to the aspirational piece. I definitely think that if you can see, like, look, we grew up, I grew up looking at Mary Robinson, you know, she was our president when I was whatever age, I won't say, you know, and like the reality of it is that's really significant, because she definitely, as a young girl, I looked at her not knowing how the world was telling us how to be. And I was kind of going, oh, look, our president is a woman. Isn't that wonderful? Like, let's all be presidents one day, and that's possible. So I think the visibility piece is really key.
Well, I definitely think it's possible for you anyway, Lynne. we have another question coming in as well. We're going to go to Laura now.
Hi there, thank you. Thanks everyone, all the speakers, that's really interesting. I'll try and speak in some kind of logical fashion, because to be honest, having heard all of you, I think I could have a good conversation with everybody, starting from Nora's research. To introduce myself, I'm currently doing a doctorate, and my area of study is the coaching intentions of elite Scottish female footballers. And part of my justification is the impact of having females on the next generation. If you can't see it, you can't be it, and all that. So I'm going to look into your research, Nora, if I can find it. But my question really was, it was first introduced by, I think, Claire, who talked about retaining elite coaches, but then, Lynne, and then Claire mentioned the high performance coaching pathways. It's probably a bit of both. I'm really just interested to find out a bit more about how high level coaches are retained in Ireland.
I can talk a bit about the programme, I suppose, and it kind of stemmed from looking at research and similar programmes that are done within the UK, and trying to get more women into that high performance coaching arena, I suppose. So what we hope to do is kind of support them from at a number of different levels. So again, that exposure to the high performance environment by working with the high performance team that's there. And I think that's kind of key. So we worked, like we said, with those other sports, and for them to come on board and for all of us to implement the same program, we had to have buy-in from the high performance teams there. And probably in every case, they're the male coaches that are operating in their high performance sport, and you had to have them open to allowing those coaches into that environment, and to, you know, be able to ask questions when they're in the height of preparing for, let's say, an Olympic Games. So that was the kind of the big kind of buy-in to set up that program. And then we're also then trying to support with that whole personal development piece around, you know, understanding your coaching philosophy, you know, what are your strengths, what is your coaching style, and also, like, again, those workshops as well are around just recognizing that you are good enough and you do have the skills. And then also we're bringing in a mentoring piece for each of the coaches to be partnered with a mentor with a background in that space. So they're the kind of things that we've recognized are needed. It's still going to be probably, you know, a pathway and a challenge that we get females into that space and then retain them. But hopefully we'll look to do that over the next number of years. I don't know if Lynne then wants to follow up even from that side.
It's actually a really interesting question, because like, I genuinely think we're at such an early stage in this, is that there isn't an established pathway, and I think that's what we're trying to get the information first in order to inform what we do, and then the coaching pathway that Claire is involved with, is we're hoping to use it as a blueprint, as a trial, as to what to do. But I suppose if we think about the information that we have from World Rugby around retention is around network. I think that's come out from the Sport Ireland research too. Understanding the life transitions piece, I think that's an important piece too. Having like a system that supports the women specific things, like whether that's maternity policies and whether that's family friendly environments, like they're all quite important. Having male advocates that support the female coaches, the cultural pieces that we spoke about, I think they're all really, really key parts to it. And I think they're the kind of things that are coming back from the World Rugby toolkit and the Sport Ireland research, and just the anecdotal stuff that we've come up with. But like, I'd definitely be happy to send any of that stuff on to you afterwards if you need.
I can jump in there as well. What might interest you is that the FAI have done like an athlete transition program, So it'd be worth following up with them. And they currently have one on at the minute. I think it's UEFA B license, and they've got a number of athletes on that. And they would have linked in with the UEFA maybe have an athlete transition coaching program as well, where they were encouraging their sports to do it, because they felt that if we get them coaching and if we tap into them when they're still players, that's more likely to then keep them involved. Now, some people have different opinions on that there. Like I've spoken to other consultants who would say, involved in, say, running these type of coaching programs, who would say that the athlete, yes, is very good at the technical and tactical side of things of the game, but because they haven't been coaching for a number of years, they don't have those kind of interpersonal skills and how to manage conflicts within their teams, how to, when somebody's not selected, how to have those kind of conversations. So, and that type of stuff nearly you develop as you grow as a coach. So you might start coaching, certain levels, and then you learn something from that journey, and then you move on to a different team or a different age group or whatever it might be. You're learning all the time as a coach. But for an athlete who goes straight into coaching, they miss all that. And so that's something to consider as well. And I think like there's other barriers that athletes sometimes don't know exist, like whether or not they want time away from the game when they retire. If they jump straight into coaching, it's too much for them, they get frustrated, or if they jump in at the wrong level. So you might have been an international athlete. Does that mean that you can coach at an international level? At the time, you probably think, well, I was able to, you were so involved maybe in how the team was performing or the decision making of the team that you feel, well, yeah, I could coach at that level if given a chance. But sometimes your sport don't think you're ready for that level, and sometimes athletes can get annoyed at that as well. So it's I think you need like a very open and honest relationship between the sport and the athlete, and that you nearly map out a journey together, so that the athlete, if they want to coach at an international level, they can see their path to that, but it doesn't mean that they're going to jump straight into it. But I think there's a little bit of managing that has to be done as well.
I might jump in one more other point, sorry, just that it's probably as well two-sided in how we get women to that level. Like we're providing these supports for the coaches, but if we don't put in the right system at the NGB level, like if I look at coaches that are now part of that high performance team and how they got there, it's by being visible, being there at the trials, then starting coaching at the first level on the international kind of stage at junior level, and then slowly getting asked, oh, can you do the next competition the following year? And it's not a very transparent system. It's the high performance team that are there. They're looking for coaches who can take this crew for this international regatta. I'll ask this guy, I know he's been here, he's shown commitment. And without a really transparent way of how we select our coaches or a really obvious pathway, I suppose even how Nora and Lynne were talking about that recruitment process, when it's even a professional position, like nearly that same transparency and recruitment needs to be for those volunteer positions that are actually the stepping stones to high performance. So while I'm aware that we're providing these supports for the coaches, there's still a piece that needs to go in at the NGB level with the high performance team. And it's like, well, what is the pathway for a coach to move into this position? I just think that's important to add.
That's really, really important. And it was actually something I was thinking of there, and it kind of almost takes it a step backwards then. And Irene might have a view on this just from a grassroots level as well, just getting the right people involved.
Yeah, and I suppose they have to start somewhere. So getting them involved at grassroots and non-elite level to get their trade, as it were, and kind of to build that coaching competency. So it is about recruitment initially, and a lot of the women in my study would have got involved when they became parents. So when their children started playing, that's how they entered into coaching. But the majority of those women still saw that their longevity in coaching was based on how long their children would stay playing. So, I suppose we have to look at who wants to get involved in coaching. So those that have an interest and an appetite, we have to align that with giving them the chance and giving them the opportunity within a club setting, and then give them a real chance by giving them the opportunity to develop as coaches. So it's not just, and this has been mentioned a few times, it's not male versus female, or it's not male and female, it's just coaching. And it's using everybody in the club, because there are females in the clubs that are in decision-making positions that I suppose are maybe thinking or assuming that the male coach will just be more experienced, or maybe those senior adult players are thinking, oh, the male coach will be more experienced. So there's an onus on us all really to give them that opportunity, and then the females themselves to take the opportunity. So asking people to get involved and then supporting them and make sure that network of support is around them from the start of their journey, because maybe in volunteer and at grassroots level, we're guilty because we've so few volunteers of just giving them the bag of footballs and saying, I'll see you at the end of the year, and best of luck. So we need to make sure that there's more support there than that. And it's not just, let's put them on the coaching course on the Saturday that's coming up. It's support on the ground. And I think that'll help with the retention side of it. So take the chance as a female and maybe give the chance as a male or a female that's existing in coaching or in club officer roles.
Lynne, World Rugby seem to be quite proactive about involving women in the game, whether it's at board level or growing the participation numbers. In terms of coaching, what's their vision for getting women involved in coaching?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what the information that they've gathered in the 2017 World Cup, of all of the teams that were there was only one head coach and 4 assistant coaches in the system. And I think the aspiration is for let me see, where are we now? 2021 to 2029 for all of the head coaches to be females. And similar with their referees, by 2024 Olympic Games, they want all of the referees coaching the women's sevens games to be female. So yeah, look, I think it's a relatively informed target, and I think their advice is to ensure that your target obviously is achievable and meaningful. But equally, they're very strategic in how they intend for that to happen, and as well, it's the second strategic priority in their whole strategy, and as a result of it, they'll have that resources to push it. And the rationale behind that, like it is an inclusive piece because of all of the reasons we know, but also is that the exponential growth in women's sport is a huge business case behind why they want to see that happen. So either way, it's definitely going to happen, and there's rationale behind it.
Do you think it's realistic, Nora, that they will get to, it sounds quite ambitious when you say it out loud, Lynne, it does sound like, when you think of the starting point to getting there, and especially when, we're having conversations and, we're talking about women lacking confidence, and we're talking about women wanting to finish coaching and when their kids stop coaching, and that fact that there are so few professional positions for women. Nora, do you think that they're going to get there?
It is definitely ambitious, but it's really exciting to see a world rugby to see the highest level that people are being that ambitious, and they're leading by example, and I think that's a key thing. But they're not just saying it either. Like, they do have coaching programs in place where they're trying to support the unions in how they even develop their own coaches as well. Like, even here in Ireland, I mean, myself and Lynne would have a few pals who probably believe that they can already coach the national team. They have their heart set on that's what they want to do, and they want to be one of the best coaches in the world. And I just think that's fantastic, and I would love to be like that, because I definitely don't have those expectations of myself or views of myself. But I'm looking at them and I'm like, that is just so cool, that's what they're driving towards. And we've other friends who are on the World Rugby programme and will be going to the next World Cup to support as a part of the coaching team of that particular union. And that's part of the World Rugby programme as well, where they're providing funding to put these positions in place so that females can be part of that coaching setup, go and experience coaching and have that opportunity at the highest level and be completely involved in it, and have they have a proper job to do at that World Cup, and with KPIs attached and everything. It's a proper coaching role. So I think when you see the resources that World Rugby are putting behind it and the actions that they're putting in place, then you can see how it'll happen. And they are trying to bring the unions with them. So it's kind of like, how do we replicate that at a lower level, having those ambitions and being able to then provide more local supports and resources, etc., to replicate something like that within Ireland?
One positive that I'm going to take from the lockdown and the pandemic is that we're having lots of Zooms and webinars, and that they're all recorded, and that in 10 years time or 15 years time or 20 years time, we're going to have these to look back and go, remember when that was a thing? And we'll be laughing and joking about them, because there'll be women managing World Cup winning soccer teams or rugby teams or on Ireland winning teams. Well, hopefully anyway. I have to say I really enjoyed today's chat. It's definitely something I think is going to explode in the next number of years, and this is just the start of it. So I just want to thank Nora and Irene and Claire and Lynne for joining me today. Absolutely fantastic, so insightful, and I'm looking forward to following your coaching careers as well those of you that are coaching, see how it goes. So thanks a million. I'm going to hand you back to Alan now to wrap it all up.
Thanks, Marie.
I'm going to quickly pass to Ed, because he's definitely better to wrap up than me.
Not at all. It's not the first time I've been overlooked, Marie. Don't worry. That was absolutely fantastic, guys. And what a way to bring our webinar series to a close. And I mean it from the bottom of my heart, and in respect for everything we're trying to do with Movement Skill Acquisition Ireland. That was an absolutely fantastic way to conclude. I'm drawn to a couple of quotes from some of our speakers. Our first speakers, we had Gabriella Wolf and Rebecca Luthwaite, and Rebecca said, hopefully in time we won't need to have women only webinars, that it'll just be the norm, and it'll just be but she said, but until such time, let's keep pushing that agenda. And we were so happy to do that and be a part of that. And one other quote was from Niamh Buffini a couple of weeks back, when she said that women are nurturers by nature, and we've so much to offer from a coaching perspective, but that we're not maybe even aware of, let's say. And I think that's something that feeds into the point that Lynne made about the use of words that we use. I think I could get more of them, the mums, to be involved with me as a volunteer coach dad with my kids, if I go to them and say, look, I need someone to be more to help support and collaborate with us on the coaching, as opposed to using words that might, spook them, and for the time being. So I've pages of notes here, as I'm sure that many others do. And for anyone who has any suggestions for future themes or future webinars that they'd like, please get in touch with us. Our email is movement.skillac.ireland@gmail.com. That's movement.skillac.ireland@gmail.com. And as Marie so rightly said, all our webinars are on our YouTube channel, MSA Ireland. And Phil and I, both two academics, and actually Al now as well, we use these webinars in our courses as lecturers. These webinars are forming current live content for our courses, for our degree programs that we work on. And so forget about 10, 15 years from now, they're currently being used because they have provided us with fantastic resource for our students to appreciate what maybe previous generations have not had an opportunity to appreciate. So on behalf of us at Movement Skill Acquisition Ireland, thank you so much, Marie, for hosting today's webinar. And to Claire, Nora, Lynne, and Irene, thank you so much for your time and engagement. And to all our attendees from around the world, which it looked like today, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for your engagement over the last 8 weeks and all your questions. It is an absolute joy to be involved in this series. So signing off now, thanks, and see you all soon, hopefully.